You're listening to the Australian Hunting and Beyond podcast with Matt, where we talk about hunting, shooting, fishing, camping, and everything else that the great outdoors has to offer. Let's get into it.
I apologise in advance because I've been hit with the flu, so my voice is probably a bit ordinary tonight, and I didn't want to postpone again. I had some circumstances last week and had to move this recording. So tonight we've got Phoebe Yude, who is the ADA president for the ACT and Snowy Mountains branch, and I'm more excited that you're on here because it's a stitch up from your husband. That's gold.
Yeah, he's a bit of a shit like that.
He said it's something you both do to each other. And he reached out and said, I think it was after Naomi's, who's ADA vice president here in Sydney, listening to that and said, oh, I've got a guest for you. It's my wife. It'll be a stitch up, but hey, let's do this anyway. So of course I reached out and went, hey, I'm in.
You're friends, right?
So let's get into your background and hear about you and hunting because firstly, I think it's absolutely amazing that you're a president of the ADA branch. And same as Naomi, I've got a big drive, and it's something I promote on the podcast regularly, is getting more women into our sport, lifestyle, whatever you want to call it, and seeing people like yourself and Naomi who are in those leadership roles. It's bloody awesome because I think that's going to foster it and keep that sort of snowball effect going because it's also, it looks inclusive. That's the big one for me. When you go to a club and it's all boys, it doesn't look that inclusive, and I could see how women would be off-put. Hell, I've got out of a couple of clubs because it wasn't enticing and I didn't like the people and how cliquey it was. So I think it's a really good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, well, I mean, there's a couple of things you touched on there that, yeah, the whole thing of male-dominated activities, I spent 30 years in the military, so it's not something I'm afraid of as a female. And all of the stuff that I do now is as a result of my husband encouraging me to do it. So I'm one of those really lucky women that have a really kind and supportive man behind her. In terms of keeping women, getting women in the sport, well, yeah, absolutely. Parents are the most influential people in a child's life, and surprisingly, research shows that mothers are the most influential out of the two parenting roles that a child will come across. So, yeah, it was also one of the things that enticed me to get into hunting was the family-friendly environment in the first branch that I was ever involved with. And I would call myself a spectator because I used to watch my husband go out on hunts and come home, and it wasn't until we went to Adelaide that I actually got involved myself. At the time, I wasn't on the hunting program. However, it was as a result of a branch event that I went to, and I came away from that weekend feeling very welcomed, and that was where it all began.
Yeah, it's awesome to hear because I think it's important to have role models, and not just for women, but for your kids as well. And I've got one of mine's getting close to, my oldest is 4, getting close to 4, and my twins, I've got a boy and a girl twin, and they're getting close to 2. Yeah. And it is so true that they're like little sponges and they just watch and do.
Yes.
And if you set that good example for them, then they will do that good example. And I see it all the time here. My wife is a passionate gardener, and my little ones over the weekend were just out there with her while she was dropping seeds in. The twins are digging and just trying to imitate whatever she's doing. And I know last year my eldest, he was planted a heap of different crops out there. So it's so true to get them involved and see that. So I get that whole element. And then I'm a school teacher as well. So it's a big one across the board for me, is educating young people. And that's what I love about what we do is it just ticks so many boxes. You
It
know,
does.
being out in the outdoors, camping, hiking, self-sufficiency, just so many things. It's just, it's awesome. That's where I fell in love with it. How did it, so you basically got into it because of your husband. Do you think your military service played a role in that? I'm going to say that's where I really got my love of shooting. So that was how I got, just sort of a flow-on effect, and I've always loved hiking. So it just put it all together.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Before joining the military, my exposure to firearms was very limited. My dad did have a firearm, however, it was predominantly locked away 95% of the time. So I didn't have any exposure to it then. But yeah, joining the military definitely exposed me to the firearm side of it. And I've always loved camping. As a kid, we did that as a family activity. And yeah, it really did tie it all together. So I was very comfortable out in nature. I was very comfortable dressed in camouflage. I was very comfortable with the firearm. So yeah, it definitely tied it all together for me.
Just ticking all the boxes for something to do on the weekend. So, and I must say, you've got, look, the Snowy Mountains is my favourite place to hunt. I love it.
I haven't hunted. I've only just started hunting public land.
Myself. Oh, okay.
So I'm yet to hit that point where I can say, oh, this is my favourite place to go. I'm still discovering the public land hunting available to us. So
there's so many good forests down there, and it's just, I don't know. For me, it's just, there's a different feel down the Snowies. I love how cold it gets. I love the crisp air. I don't even know how to describe it. Going to different places and hunting is not the same. I never get as excited to go anywhere else but down there, which is a good thing. So yeah, I haven't been down there. I've missed getting out for the rut dates, so I went north and I had a great time. But I really am looking forward to hopefully next year making sure I don't miss out and get down there.
Absolutely.
And I'll have to get down there a couple of times in between as well. But it's definitely a good one. So how did the president role come about? Because it can't be something that's just you've been here in a blink of an eye and I'm taking over.
Well, so I started hunting in 2016 and always tried to get involved in any way, shape or form with the branches that we've been members of. So when we were in Adelaide, I initiated the Women's and Families Weekend that the South East branch hold, because for me it was about developing a level of understanding for those who didn't necessarily want to hunt but wanted to support those in their family who did. And for me, it all came back to education. That was my journey with Brad. I could never understand how he could go out for 1 or 2 nights and it didn't matter whether he came home with a harvest or not. He was knackered, but he was different. There was some sort of difference to him in relation to it. So, of course, I'm a very curious person by nature. I ask a lot of questions. And that's how I got my education, was through asking questions and developing a level of understanding. And it made sense to me that if there was an opportunity for other people to have that, then maybe we would have more supporters. Because you don't necessarily have to be a hunter in order to appreciate it or like it or respect it or anything like that. It's one thing to harvest an animal, it's another to support someone who does. So I wanted to create that opportunity. So that's what I did over in the South East branch, and that was picked up by one of the other younger women when we left there and came across here. In true form, how did I end up becoming president? I attended the AGM and my husband was sitting next to me ribbing me saying, go on, you should do it.
Gold.
So I asked some curious questions, and 15 minutes later, here I am sitting there, the new president of the of the branch.
What have I got myself into?
Yeah. However, it's been exceptionally rewarding. The small period of time, 2 years that we've been here now, I've gotten to know a lot of the men that have been part of the branch. They're pretty much part of the fabric of the branch. And it's really, really lovely from a female's perspective to be welcomed into the fold. And some of the feedback that I've received has been really, really nice in terms of people who have been silent members for years are coming back because there's something different about the branch. It has a buzz about it now. And we're doing things. We're promoting hunting. We're promoting sustainability. We're promoting conservation. One of our most successful events that we had was in February this year, where we went to the National Multicultural Festival, which is huge in Canberra. And it's the first time that a venison stall has actually been run there. And it was phenomenal from the perspective of there were people who didn't know that deer were in Canberra, let alone in Australia. So we had a lot of really good conversations. There was a young fella that came up. His dad's a hunter, not a member of our branch. However, I hope that he does join us. And this young man showed us a photo of his first stag that he'd taken, and he just received so much positive feedback. His face was positively glowing, this little kid. I think he was 10. So I think if we can influence and we can support those young people, even if they're not ours, then that creates longevity of hunting in Australia.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. I think it's awesome to hear you attend an event like that and promote outside the regular. I think that's one thing I've spoken to a lot of people in the trying to influence space, whether it be through the union or politics or the like. And a lot of the times we're preaching to the converted. And it's hard to get that message out there. And we are at a bit of a disadvantage, I feel, because social media with the algorithms and things like that are no friends of hunting. So that doesn't help us in trying to get the message out there. And if you're trying to sponsor an ad, you're probably just going to hunters, which is not the target audience. So the more we engage in activities like that, the better. I think that's amazing because that is how we grow. And I think you touched on it before really nicely, is we don't need everybody to be hunters. We need them to support hunting. And that camp that you did with the women and families, that's fantastic. My wife is never going to pull a trigger on an animal. That's just not in her makeup. And there's no issue for me about that at all. I'm happy to do it. Plus, I don't have to share the hunting time, which is always a bonus.
I think that's what Brad was hoping deep down too.
I sit there and reflect on that now and go, a few of my mates and that go, oh, wouldn't it be easier if my wife Nat was a hunter? And I was like, probably not, because then, we've got the kids and I'd prefer that she's not, so I can get away and go. She loves the camping, so that's we can camp as well. But that whole hunting side of it, I don't have to split my time. And I'm very time poor, probably like yourself. I believe you've got a young family.
Yeah.
And it's hard to get away all the time, and kids are a totally different element when it comes to hunting as well.
It does. It's a huge logistical feat. However, we used to do it down in Adelaide or in South Australia. Our now 9-year-old boy was walking the paddocks down in the southeast at the tender age of 18 months. So yeah, we have photos of him standing next to a head, freshly harvested head. So look, we started them young. Our daughter, who is 7 going on 8, had her first pink camouflage gun bag at the tender age of 18 months and is still talking about putting something in it. Yeah, so, yeah, start them young. You know, it's not, I think one of the saddest things is the stereotype that hunters are labelled with. We're not flanny wearing people with teeth missing out of our head and all that sort of stuff. A lot of us are very well educated. And during the week we push pens or we're teachers, right? We're not that, that stuff you see in the movies. We're normal humans as well. It's just that we have different values such as sustainability, conservation, all that sort of stuff.
I think that doesn't get out there as much because it's not the narrative the general population already associates with. And
absolutely.
I feel that's where we've done an injustice a long time ago. That perception has grown and it's such a tricky one. I'm constantly talking on the podcast that I won't support poachers, period. But then I know people that are mates with people that poach. And I cut ties with people like that because it's just not, I don't want to be associated with that side of it. And for that side, that is an issue going forward because whilst that small amount of people, and I do honestly think it's a minority, but it's enough to tarnish the reputation of everybody else.
Absolutely.
Now, that's a massive problem that we face as a group. And it's funny, I watch social media and I run the Fallow Deer Hunters of Australia Facebook group, which is, I think we're getting close to 30,000 people. So it's quite a large group. And I watched the comments and I think there was one bloke put up there about someone poached and he got video footage of him, etc. And then there was a heap of people calling him out, don't snitch. And, and I was just sitting there going, hold on, you're allowing someone to break the law to put us in a worse spot than we are because that's going to get publicised. That's going to tarnish the reputation of hunters. It's the reason farmers don't want people on when they've had a bad experience for that. There's so many flow-on effects of it that impact good people, and that's the issue, is that majority of people don't know the good hunters.
Absolutely.
And they see what gets portrayed in the media. And I think, look, no disrespect, I watched one on SBS about they were culling cats and they really I think it was Vice, and they really focused on a gentleman that was just portrayed hunting not in the best light. Pretty much exactly what you said before. Flannelette, teeth missing. I think he had a cat skin hat, cat fur just pinned on the wall. And it's like, that's never going to be digested by the general population in a good way. So even if he's the nicest bloke, and he probably is, but they've deliberately picked him to take advantage of that. And that sucks because I don't think he's trying to tarnish hunting, but in the current society we live in, I think we need to be mindful of that sort of stuff too, because that's going to hurt us and hurt us in the long run. And if people aren't friends of hunting, they're enemies in sort of the essence. Absolutely. And we need to work on that.
Absolutely. Well, there's a couple of things there that have popped up for me as you were talking about that. The first thing is there was an article. We were asked to do an interview with the Canberra Times several weeks ago, and the Vice President of ACT and Snowy Mountains branch, Dave Carter, went along and did that for us because, I wasn't available. However, he was asked to have a photo taken and he was asked to put on camouflage clothing, and he very politely declined and said, no, let's just take a photo in my normal clothes. And I was really proud of him for doing that, because the photo that he had taken is what each of us wears on a day-to-day basis. You can walk past someone in the street and not know that they're a hunter. Photo says 1,000 words. That was my point, was that, him declining and having his photo taken. I was really proud of him for that, because that's more in line with who we are and what we're about. And the other part that you were talking about, it's the minority that ruin it for the majority of hunters who toe the line and do the right thing. Absolutely. We have a program called the Wildlife Management Program within the branch that we've reinvigorated, and it's for the purpose of assisting landholders with their pest animal control. We've put a hell of a lot of work into that, and that is the biggest challenge that we have, is developing the relationships with the landholders so that they are comfortable to permit us onto their property. So we've put a lot of work into the boundaries of what that looks like, and we've put a lot of work into how those properties are managed in accordance with, and we're constantly reinforcing to the landholders, this is a relationship between you and the hunters that are coming onto your property. We are here to do what you need and what you want us to achieve. The ball is in your court. You tell us what you want and we will do it. So obviously within our confines and our boundaries as hunters, however, it's very much in line with what the landholders are looking for. A lot of relationship building, and it takes time.
I think you're right. It does take time because trust is hard to earn and easy to break. And that has to be a focus. And unfortunately, and I've talked about it a lot, like my journey of trying to get private access has not really happened very well. And the feedback consistently is they've had a bad experience with poaching or hunters doing the wrong thing. And
word of mouth.
Yes.
Word of mouth works really well in the country.
Well, and that's it. I'm a city boy. I'm up here in Sydney. So that, I've already got a couple of strikes against me, and I get it. And I'm not complaining. I totally get why farmers wouldn't let someone like myself on, that they've never met me. I'm nowhere near them. Get it. Not complaining about that. How we go about changing that dynamic and using it more as a resource. And one of the things I posted a little while ago was Jeremy Clarkson. I love Clarkson's Farm. It's one of my favourite TV shows. Love
hilarious.
it. So season 3 came out and I binged it. I was devo. They only put the first 4 out and then I had to wait a week for the next 4. But that's fine. But when he did the venison thing, it was just unbelievably good, because I went, you know what? He's got such a massive reach. That is what hunting in general terms needs. And when he explained it and he made it and he went through that whole process, I had mates reach out and say, hey, is this what you do? And it was interesting that they'd never asked me or wanted to know more, but they've seen it on a hit TV show and then all of a sudden, bang. And I think it's because he's such a good, genuine sort of bloke that sort of come across from that. But just going back to what I was saying about property owners, I sent a letter to one, and respectful letter. I generally just bit about myself, father, teacher, all the, just me in general. Requesting access or even just a conversation to, see if we strike up a relationship or not. And I remember getting this email back, because I put my details on there, obviously, and the property owner pretty much just put the whole thing in caps, and you do not have permission. You cannot hunt here. And it was this massive sort of tirade. And I emailed back saying, thank you for your response. I appreciate you taking the time coming back to me. I'm unsure the context of your response, because if I had plans on coming on illegally, I wouldn't be reaching out via a letter and giving you my details to, request access legally. And I never heard back from them, and that's fine. That's their prerogative. But it was it's just been an eye-opener trying to pursue that in the feedback has been that they've had bad experiences, and that sucks. And a lot of time it's not even hunters, it's poachers, that their land's getting poached, and so they don't want to let a hunter on there because, hey, there's people hunting on there illegally. So there's already that gap between, like, the bridge for trust has already been sort of broken.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you also have those, like, look, everyone does stuff with positive intent, and it's about just taking a step back and considering things from the other person's perspective. Time and time again, I've heard, oh, I went out and I ended up losing access because I took a couple of mates out with me. That's because the access was for you, not for your mates. And it's about having the ability to exercise some empathy, I think, from the perspective of the landholder. As much as you have the positive intent and you might have the absolute trust in your mates to be doing the right thing, the landholder doesn't know them.
100%.
So that's, yeah, and that's really important to us, especially with the WMP that we have, that people are allocated to landholders. And we've actually said to landholders, if you don't believe that this person is the right person to be on your property, please let us know, and we'll connect you with another hunter. And the good thing is that those people who put their hand up to be part of the program are doing it for the right reasons. So, yeah, we have so much more to offer. We're not just, yes, deer is our primary. However, we have so many more skills that are applicable across the board in terms of pest management as well. So, yeah.
And I think that's probably missed a little bit because of the name. And I've said that before, like with our Shooter Farmer Fisher party, is that a lot of people, I believe, are turned off straight away as soon as they see that first word shooter. They just go to the, pro-gun. Everyone has machine guns because that's what the bloody media says. I honestly think that. When I speak to mates, they literally look at the name, and we're talking, 40-year-olds that look at the name of the political group, and that's how they decide who I'm going to vote for. And that's a concern within itself. But that is almost what I look at and go, okay, the ADA is deer predominant. And I've heard so many people say that. Is that that's the focus. It's only about deer, and if it's not deer, they don't care. So I'm glad to hear you say that's not actually the case, that you're here to work with landholders and provide them with a mutual service, I suppose, so that everyone's a winner as opposed to it being offset.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is too is that we all know that deer are prevalent throughout Australia, and I honestly believe in the 6 degrees of separation theory, and that has actually reigned true within the first 4 months of us reinvigorating the WMP. We had people reaching out that they had heard from their mates about what we were doing for them, and they wanted to know if we could help them out. So, and clearly we were doing the right thing, because we wouldn't have been recommended by their landholder friends if we weren't.
That's a massive one. From everything that I talk to, is everyone tells me as soon as you get one, it'll be the flow-on effect if you do the right thing, because they'll all talk. And
absolutely.
I've got a couple of mates that they've earned really good access, and good on them. They've put a lot of hard work into it, and in talking to them, they spend a lot of time there too. I feel it's a disadvantage on top of being from Sydney, is that there's connotations about Sydney-siders and city slickers that are walking around the bush with guns. And then if you need to be on a property regularly, because that's what that farmer requires, it's not going to happen if you're 3 or 4 hours away from the property. That's just, that's the reality. And, I constantly on my wife to say, hey, let's move down somewhere, but that's not going to happen. So
there are plenty of places that are only 15 minutes from a major city centre, mate. You just got to find something.
Yeah, look, it's part of the journey, and it's just one of those things. I think that it's been an interesting one for me, seeing it, speaking to a lot of people and speaking to guests, and they've got access around where I live, and it's like, oh, okay, wow, like there are opportunities there. It's just a matter of trying to find it and get it, and hey, that's all part of it. To be honest, I do like that side of getting away. That.
Yeah, absolutely.
To go camping and to get a break from the city. Like, I'd love to have some access for a regular supply of venison, but I don't ever want that to replace going away and, for a few days, because the trip is, that 3-4 hour drive, because I want, it's the whole thing for me. It's not just about shooting a deer or whatever.
Right.
It's not just that. And a lot of people don't get that side of it too. So it's such a multifaceted thing, hunting, for me anyway.
It is. There's nothing more beautiful than sitting and watching the bush wake up. There is just nothing more beautiful. And similarly, there's nothing nicer than watching it go to sleep for the night as well. I've sat watching for deer, and I've had hares and rabbits within 5 meters of me. No idea that I'm there, just going about their nightly routine. Yeah, it's incredible just being able to sit there and be so close to them.
I get distracted. I love nature. I love watching them. So I've never been one to do a lot of sit and waits, because I get impatient, and that's probably why I'm not that great a hunter. But I sit there and go, watching things and getting distracted at what's going on. I think the last time I was down in Mooragle North, we had a Brumby probably hang around 20 minutes, just running up and down and huffing and puffing and whatnot. Yeah. And I had a great time. Probably not great for deer hunting with him doing that, but had an absolute blast. So I think with a high stress job, or not even a high stress job, I wouldn't call my job that. I'd say just a busy lifestyle, like just living in a city, you're just always busy.
Yeah.
And that disconnect and getting away from it is
absolutely.
It's sometimes I look at it and go, my mates constantly, I've got a couple of mates into it and they've dropped out because they went, hold on, how long's it taking you to get a deer? And I was like, well, that's not what it's about though. That's the payoff. Yeah, it's great. But like, it's all the other things for it that you're doing
absolutely.
With it. That's a win. So
that's one of the biggest misconceptions that I think those that are not hunters themselves have, is that you go out there, you walk out, you shoot something. It's almost as though they think that the deer, the animals are going to be there. They're not. And a lot of work and a lot of effort goes into it. It's so much more technical than what people realise. It's not like it's not like a fishbowl. So the number of people that we've spoken to about it are surprised that it's not like a fishbowl. And you're right. The food at the end of it is the payoff, because damn, they taste good. Especially when you can make your own sausages and mince and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it supplements what we pay for.
Well, I think this is the mixed messaging, right? So if you've got the media and the Invasive Species Council saying how many deer there are, like I read something the other day from the Invasive Species Council and I just shook my head, because they were comparing the deer plague, I think was their wording, to the rabbit plague. And I just sat there and just shook my head and went, hold on, like how many fawns do a deer have compared to a rabbit? Like they're not even close, but it's that marketing and scare tactic. And then I understand why people sit there and go, oh, it's like shooting fish in a barrel, because there's so many of them when they throw these massive numbers out there. And it's like, most people didn't even know there was deer in Australia. And you probably find that they're within 15 minutes of you for a lot of places.
Oh, there was a deer sighted not too far from where we live, actually, the other night. So they're everywhere. There was a red deer hit on one of the highways, probably about 20 minutes up the road from us. So, they're coming in. They're coming into the built-up areas looking for food. And I guess that's where us working with Parks and Recreation is really important, working in tandem with them to be able to support them in what they need to do in terms of the aerial culling. We're not fans of aerial culling. However, we also understand that it's the only way that the government can manage the feral population or the pest population. However, I think that we can contribute to helping with reducing some of the numbers. I know it's not as effective, us being on foot. However, for us, having that meat used is important as part of that sustainability piece as well. I personally don't like aerial culling because the animal is left and it's not retrieved. When I look at US, when they do the aerial culling, those carcasses are retrieved, they're processed and they're sold in the supermarkets or gifted to charities to help feed homeless or those living under the poverty line. So I think it's definitely something that we could look at. However, the food safety regulations and stuff like that are seeming to be the issue with regard to pushing anything like that further.
Which has always been an interesting one for me, especially feeding homeless, is that where is the point that we let people make their own decisions? I mean, if I was homeless and I had no food, I'm pretty confident that if someone was shooting deer and I had the opportunity to have that meat, I'd be saying yes because it's better than nothing.
Not only that, it's one of the best meats that you can ever put in your head.
That too.
Right? There are just so many benefits to having it. It's, it's great.
I think there's a couple of things you said there. I'm not a fan of aerial culling, and it's because of the waste. And then you're just feeding other feral animals. So what are you trying to achieve in that sense? I understand it's got its place in areas that you cannot get to. But the problem is I see a lot of areas where they cull from helicopters on private property that's open that you could get hunters in. Yeah. So taxpayers are getting charged to do this. And I've said it before, I would love someone to be proactive and really, look at opportunities to sell hunting, shooting off bait stations in national parks. Like you talk about Jindabyne and areas down there. Yeah. You can't tell me that if you had shooting lanes set up with blinds, employee rangers, that would be a cheaper option. Have people pay to do it, take all the meat home. That's a better option than aerial culling costing us a fortune and the meat's laid there to rot. I don't understand why options are not exhausted, and it just seems to be what is going to be the quickest and cheapest method, because that's what really worries me, and especially when we're seeing that spruiking of using 1080 poison out there to target deer. That concerns me greatly because I not only feel that that's a major issue, because if that was to get up, I feel hunting is then really under threat as a whole, because the argument about using the meat starts to go away. And I know people have said, it'd have to be a lot in there for you to consume it and have issues. That's not a chance I want to take with my family. I'm sorry.
No.
I get people do it, or especially I mean sort of with the pigs and things like that, with what they've got in them. I'm not going to be one of those people. That's cool. You do you. I'm a big believer in people do their own thing as long as it's legal.
Yeah.
That is the concern for me, that if we start to allow that pathway, when there is another opportunity for jobs to be created, meat to be harvested, especially in the current climate, people are struggling. Absolutely. It's expensive to live.
It is.
Man, it baffles me as to why we are not looking at opportunities like this and doing something, actually taking action on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Interestingly, there was a man in the 1960s that died as a result of the active ingredient in 1080 from jam.
Yeah, right. Well, I know there's no cure, that if you take enough, you're in big trouble. It's game over.
If you get in your system, Brad and I are really careful when we go out with our dogs. If there's been aerial baiting, we just don't take them full stop. It's just not worth it. Yeah, and we've both agreed that if we were to discover that one of our dogs had ingested 1080, we would do the job straight away.
Oh, it is a horrible way to go. It's
just awful. It's terrible. I think the thing that as well is the secondary effects on the landscape. So, your birds, your eagles and all that sort of stuff that come in to eat the carcass. It affects them because that stuff is active for 3 months.
So I was lucky enough to get Eric on. He's an environmental scientist, and he broke it down because I've had Clyde, from New Zealand. He's part of him and his brother have been exposing what 1080 does over there on the landscape. And I was asking him about the 1080 with birds and things like that because the data and what gets told is very different. And I actually had someone reach out to me because I shared a post about an area that was 1080 baiting rabbits, and then in the next photo was an eagle with the rabbit. And shout out to Brett, he sent me a message saying that it can't impact birds, and he is correct in a sense that it takes a lot for birds of prey for it to actually go into their system. However, and I sent it to him too, I said, well, here's the WA list of what animals are impacted to what level, and it has birds on there. So it does, but to an extent. And then the other issue, which Eric and I were discussing on a previous episode, was the fact that there's not enough data out there, that the research really hasn't been conducted, and that's concerning. And then I had a bloke from another state reach out. He works for a regulatory body, and he was saying how he's very suspicious that there's a lot of dead eagles and things like that he has found that he believes is 1080 related. So I don't know. I'd rather be safe than sorry. I don't think it's something we need to have out there. It's a tricky one because then the arguments with dogs and foxes as well, and I get that side of it, but then I also sit there and go, well, hold on, if you're aerial culling and leaving bodies to rot, that's increasing those populations. So the argument offsets itself. And then, talking about dingoes now, that new study that came out saying, I think it was in the ACT, talking about the dingoes are all pure blood down there. And there's a lot of controversy around that, and it's very interesting. There's a lot going on in our landscape. And one thing I was really pleased to see is down in Victoria with that public land grab going for national parks, or what they're wanting to do, is that quite a few of the hunting organisations have sort of combined forces and sent a joint letter. Because I think that's one issue that we have as well, is that hunting groups don't work that great together. Everyone has their own little pocket.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone's always looking to feather their own nests. And I think if, the field and game, SSAA, ADA, if we scratch each other's backs, I mean, we might not necessarily like, shotguns, and we might not necessarily like pistols or whatever your bend is. We're in it together. Our commonality is the use of firearms. So when it all comes back to it, so we're all in it together. Yeah, I'll be interested to see what happens with the National Firearm Registry as well, and what the plans are for that moving forward. And I'd really, it's good to see the organisations in Victoria working together, because hopefully that will carry across to something as important as the Firearm Registry as well.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things. I get it. It's so hard to get so many different people with so many different interests in the same room with the same goal because it impacts different people differently. And everyone, rightfully so, has their own interest at heart. You know, there's no club out there that would be wanting to put forward another club at the detriment to their club. I get that, you know, and that's completely understandable too. So it's such a tricky one to be able to go, how do we navigate that we get everybody on the same page under one banner? It's so difficult. And that's half the issue too, because it makes us weak, like compared to our rivals. And that's a problem, because if you look at the rivals that are just for animal justice, it's just about saving animals, all animals. They don't care. They don't care if there's too many on the landscape. They don't care if they're starving. They just don't want us taking them.
And that's the common thread with those organisations.
Correct. So they can band together much easier than what we can. And it's just that extra hurdle on top of what we already face, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess if we can come back to that common thread of firearms and the benefits of it, of what we do. Firearms is the way that are the tools that we use in order to be able for us to do what we want to do and gain the benefits. So, if people could come together under that common thread, that'd be awesome. I think that's a really good place to start.
I think it would be. I think it's going to be a very long journey, and I don't know how long we've got. Sometimes I sit there and just go, ugh.
However, that's the reason we live by the values that we do, and by being role models to our children, hopefully there will be more people taking up the interests, and we'll see it going on for many, many years to come. I mean, you look several decades ago, people who grew up on farms and were surrounded by it, that was part of their lifestyle. It's what they grew up knowing and were very accepting of it. Once we started moving in closer to cities and all that sort of stuff just died out. There weren't those role models. There weren't people teaching the younger generations of, this is how you do stuff, son or daughter. This is how it runs, right? When you're on a property, you leave a gate, how you find it. Just those little things, right? And I'd like to think that our branch is opening itself up to those who, or is it, I think, is appealing to those who have been curious about it but don't know how to get started. And I'd like to think that we're one of those branches that are putting ourselves out there enough for people to tap into that curiosity and give it a go.
I think that's a great way to wrap it up. If you haven't checked out the ADA, I think you really need to. And if you're down there in the ACT or the Snowies, get in touch with this branch and go and meet Phoebe, because I've been very impressed hearing everything from you tonight, and I definitely live far too far away to come down there myself, but who knows in the future.
No, you don't.
Where do you guys meet?
We meet at the Harmony German Club in Narrabundah the third Thursday of every second month. So our AGM is coming up on the 20th of June. Kicks off at 7:30. We have a guest speaker every meeting, and our next meeting we will be having Tony Saros from Beretta come down with the number one redhead in Australia.
Yes, I've heard about that.
It's magnificent. It's just... I was actually looking at the doors to the room that we normally meet in and saying to Brad, I don't know that Big Red's going to fit through that. So I'm already preparing myself to speak to the club and see if we can get a different room.
That's pretty cool. No, I've heard about that. I've got a couple of mates that know Tony and have told us about it and said it's just unbelievable.
It is. It's just glorious. So if anyone would like to come along, please come along. We'd love to have you. Yeah. get involved.
And just lastly, I do believe if you are a member of ADA, it doesn't matter what branch, you can attend all the different branches.
Absolutely.
And yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Which is great.
Yeah. And providing everything comes together, where we'll have a really good keynote speaker in February next year as well. So we're already working on that. This year we had Alex Profty from Aussie Bush Harvest, and that was phenomenal. We cracked over 100 attendees, and that was a blend of members and non-members of the ADA, and several new members have actually joined as a result of that event. So
yeah, wow, nice. So cool. All right, Phoebe, really appreciate your time coming on the podcast and having a chat with us, and I'm sure we'll keep in touch and see if we can do it again sometime down the track.
Absolutely, would love to. Thank you so much for having me.
No worries at all. All right, listeners, bye for now.
If you have a topic, guest, question, or any gear that you want to hear about on the podcast, shoot us an email, australianhuntingandbeyond@gmail.com. Alternatively, find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All the links are in the show notes. If you haven't already, make sure you give us a review and subscribe to our podcast on whatever platform you're listening on. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.